The Dark Lighthouse. Lighthouses are a symbol of hope, strength, and resilience. When souls are lost at sea and all hope is nearly gone, it is a lighthouse that will guide them away from danger and towards safer waters or land. No matter what the weather, lighthouses are usually always visible, no matter what. A lighthouse without its keeper is not as effective. The steadfastness of keepers is entirely commendable. They work tirelessly to ensure the lighthouse is working properly and well maintained. They're almost like a team, the lighthouse and its keeper. But what if a lighthouse and its keeper have a more insidious agenda? That instead saving souls from the sea, they take souls instead, luring anyone who has strayed far away from shore and is lost, and ensuring they do not make it to land safely. In fact, the lighthouse and its keeper feed off of the souls. In all the years my father spent on the seas and oceans in the Navy, and after he retired, he spent many years as a marine salvager. He cleaned up after shipwrecks and other marine casualties. He's come across many treasures over the years. One of the favorites was an old captain's log from 1947. He was called out to an old shipwreck far off the coast of Southern Virginia. The last entry in the log stated that Captain Cromwell feared for his crew and himself. A huge storm was brewing up, and they were being thrusted into unfamiliar waters at the mercy of the sea because the ship stopped running completely. Captain Cromwell wrote that he kept seeing something that resembled a lighthouse off in the distance. It was when he blinked, it would disappear and reappear in a completely different direction. He felt like he was going crazy, but he remembered hearing tales of such an ominous lighthouse. He continued to write that the Dark Lighthouse, as it came to be nicknamed over the years, lures wayward ocean travelers in the dead of night with its dimly lit, hypnotic beam of light that pours from its gray-tinted glass windows. It is a massive, all-black lighthouse. Nothing about it seems light or safe. It leads them to danger rather than safety, then kills every soul aboard and feeds off their souls so that the lighthouse and its demonic keeper can thrive. The thing is, there is no proof that it exists other than this one faded old captain's log my dad found many years ago. I suppose no one has ever seen it and lived to tell about it, for the captain's log ended with one last note. Captain's log, October 30th, 12:06 a.m. It's dark. It's hopeless. Our only chance is that lighthouse. Let's just hope the tales about the Dark Lighthouse aren't true, and I'll be leading my men to safety. If anyone finds this log, we didn't make it. Stay away from that lighthouse. It may have been the cause of our demise. Tell my family I love them. Signed, Captain Cromwell. Since then, no one has heard about or spoken of the Dark Lighthouse. Cromwell and his crew were never seen again. Only scattered remains of their ship were left. My father doesn't talk about the Dark Lighthouse very often. It fascinates him very much, but he admits that it terrifies him to think that such an evil structure exists. Once I asked him if he ever went out searching for the lighthouse, and he answered with a stern no. Now, my dad is the bravest man I know, Very adventurous, too. I guess that's where I get it. He said he never would go looking, and prays to God that I never go in search of it either. I suppose that's why I'm feeling a little bit guilty as I ready my vessel to go and search far off the southern Virginia coastline for this infamous, evil, dark lighthouse. I want to be the first soul to ever see the lighthouse and live to tell about it. I want to be able to warn people of the dangers of such an evil structure. I brought with me only some personal items, food and water, and the old captain's log with some approximate coordinates. Maybe Dad will be proud of me, or maybe he'll never see me again, because I was lured like a firefly to an insidious hypnotic beam of light in the middle of the night on All Hallows' Eve, and had my soul devoured by the dark lighthouse and its even darker keeper of souls. Well, time to disembark. A few weeks later, found washed up on a beach near the Outer Banks of North Carolina was a captain's log, dated October 30th, 2022. This is Captain Brandy Lee Rush. I'm sorry, Dad. I am so sorry. I should have listened to you. If you're reading this, I found it. I found the dark lighthouse. I fear I may never see you again. Please don't come looking for me. It's real, Dad. The lighthouse is real. My boat is dead on the water, and I'm currently staring into a gray beam of dim hypnotic light. There's a huge black lighthouse in the middle of the ocean. How? Hey, I think there's someone looking out at me through the windows. Maybe they can help me. Wait, what is that? Oh my God! The old lighthouse sleepover. There lays a small bay on the northern coast of Maine, and on that small bay sits a small town, the community of Foster's Bay. And to the left of that small bay, and that small town overlooking the ocean's waters on top the cliffs, sits an old weathered lighthouse. In a modernizing world, the lighthouse remains a staple of the past. Centuries past, truth be told. No automations, no modern upgrades. The lighthouse remains tried and true to its original functionings as it was constructed 200 years ago. Still requiring a lighthouse keeper, the building is believed to be one of the oldest dwellings in the United States. However, a building as old as the Foster Bay Lighthouse does not come without a history, and albeit a dark history at times. Like many a small town, and especially towns as old as Foster's Bay, usually has a building or two that is believed to be haunted. And if you guessed correctly, the old lighthouse was Foster's Bay equivalency. Foster's Bay is a small fishing community, and that's how the majority of the population makes its living. Nothing but old grizzled fishermen and weathered seafarers. So the rumors of the old lighthouse being haunted could be chalked up to old sailor superstitions. But everyone who is asked, everyone who knows, swears that it is haunted, and if you take a closer look, there is evidence to support such superstitions and beliefs. It's become a rite of passage among the town's younger population to stay overnight at the old decrepit lighthouse. A handful have gotten through the night, but most have not. But all have reported eerie and frightening sounds, some even witnessing ghostly apparitions. There have been, however, incidences over the years where the person who has stayed was never seen or heard from, ever again. Even with the disappearances, it hasn't stopped each generation of the younger crowd from attempting the overnight initiation. It's always been called the Old Lighthouse Sleepover, and this is how it usually transpires. A group of high schoolers pick the most stormiest and coolest of nights and hike up the cliffs to the old lighthouse. Once there, they sneak past the lighthouse keeper, who stays in the newer adjoining building to the old lighthouse. No one knows why, but whoever is on shift to watch the lighthouse hasn't actually stayed in the lighthouse for many years now, hence furthering the rumors of the dwelling being haunted. Whatever the case, once the teenagers sneak past the lighthouse keeper, a person in the group is challenged to stay overnight in the old lighthouse. No one who has been challenged has ever refused for fear of ridicule. If said individual who was chosen to spend the night in the old lighthouse makes it till morning, gets bragging rights and a $100 bill, which is another reason why no kid refuses. That's a lot of money to a lot of people in a small fishing town like Foster's Bay. The handful who survived the night have become local legends. The majority who didn't make it till morning, well, they receive a tip of the cap. Can't give them too hard a time after all, because you see, they're not staying overnight alone. They get to spend the night with old Captain Spearman. Captain Elias Spearman, that is. There's many tales regarding Captain Spearman, no one really knowing which ones to be true and which to be false. Some say he was an old sea captain in charge of many ships during his prime, but was forced into retirement and put in charge of the lighthouse at the time. Others say he was always just in charge of the lighthouse and looking after it, jealous and longing to be a true captain on the sea. His death is also a mystery, surrounded with much rumor and innuendo. Some say he was lonely and melancholy of his forced retirement and seclusion in the old lighthouse, and after some time, on a lone, dark, and stormy night, tired of his situation, he slit his throat, but before bleeding out, he tied a rope around his severed neck and hung himself from the rafters, and when his body dropped, his head popped off, and his body was discovered laying on the lighthouse floor with his severed head placed nicely in the crook of his arm. Others say the captain met his demise at the hands of his wife and her secret lover for the captain's insurance policy. They say once again, on a cold, dark, stormy night, the captain's wife and her lover ambushed him inside the lighthouse and chopped off his head, placing it between his arm and leaving his body in the corner of the room. In whichever case, and whatever rumor you are to believe, the captain did not meet a pleasant ending, and if you are to make it through the night, you will have the captain to keep you company. All incidents is the same. Every teenager's story matches pretty much word for word. The ones who survived the night and the ones who checked out early all started off by going into the lighthouse and sat down on the floor trying to get comfortable. But after a while, with the conditions outside being as cold and stormy as they were, each individual made their way to the fireplace and quickly struck up a fire. From there, each person's story differs a little on how they preoccupied their time, from reading books to listening to music to even cooking whatever they brought with them in the fireplace. But after a while, things began to happen. Strange things. Everyone who's tried the initiation has described eerie sounds, from moaning to sounds of someone or something walking about on the floor above them. Then a chill begins to permeate the room, and as they begin to get cold, A gust of wind blows down through the chimney and snuffs out the fire. Now, after this event, some flee the building immediately, and their initiation is done. But for those brave enough to continue, they are greeted by a loud, painful moaning, preceded by footsteps walking down the stairs to greet them. This is another time where some say they fled, but for the ones that continued and sat there in the dark, shivering and waiting, trying to stay brave and face whatever it was that was creeping towards them down the stairs, are greeted with a low, menacing laugh, and then the footsteps reach the bottom of the stairs. They sit there quietly, hoping not to be heard, trying to see through the darkness at what is standing at the bottom of the stairs, but it is too dark. Just then the fire relights and rages up the chimney. A bright, magnificent glow lights up the room, and at that very moment, whoever is still sitting there gazes upon what just walked down the stairs, and it is the bloody body of Captain Elias Spearman. He stands there, bloodied stump on his shoulders, still bleeding from the angry wound as if it was still fresh, and holding his severed head in his arm. This is a moment that has driven the majority of the teenagers away, but for the handful that made it through, they say the trick is, when the captain is standing there holding his head, about to approach, you do not look into the eyes of the severed head that he is holding. Instead, quickly turn away and close your eyes and scream, "You're not real! Be gone from here!" And after a few seconds, look up and the captain is gone. They say after the incident with the captain, the rest of it goes on pretty much without further incident. The night is long and morning comes slowly, but it comes, and it comes smoothly. Parents try to warn their children of the lighthouse and the ghost of Captain Spearman through bedtime stories, warning them of the dangers that await them on the cliffs. But it does not stop the younger generations from going to the lighthouse. Even with the disappearances over the years, the count is up to 20 now, I believe. So if you're feeling brave, and you and your friends decide to go up to the cliffs, and someone challenges you to stay in the lighthouse, be prepared. Collect your courage, but don't be too afraid, for you will not be alone. Old Captain Spearman will be there to keep you company. The Lighthouse. I thought I landed the coolest job in the world as a lighthouse operator. I've always had a weird obsession with the ocean, and there is something peaceful about hearing the waves crash against the concrete tower. Lately, it's been a little strange since the blue fog set in. The light no longer works, and the generator, although at full battery, no longer functions. When dusk falls is when you hear the whispers and scratching. Sleep is filled with night terrors of fish-like humans craving the flesh I wear. They call to me in my dreams. This morning, I found myself out on the rocks, staring at blue fog, reaching out for it. I'm hoping tonight, when they call for me, they will reach out for me, too. Up those twisting, winding stairs. One at a time, we walked up those winding, twisting stairs. The sound of music flowed sweetly from the top of the structure. We didn't recognize the tune. It wasn't exactly musical notes in general. Someone was humming, light humming. A little girl was humming. At least that's what most of us had thought. Jeremy was the first one to go up. He was always the bravest one out of our group, but he screamed when he got to the top. He never screamed before. Never. Not at the various scary movies that his older brother had shown us every Halloween. Not at the pranks that his brother had played on him, jumping out of the curtains with a generic Jason hockey mask and a plastic chainsaw. He never screamed. His screams were loud like glass. I froze in place while the others stared up at the darkness. Tony prayed to God. Henry muttered to himself something about breaking bones and shattering glass. I couldn't really make out what he was saying, though. The humming grew louder with every second. Every second spent listening to his screams and his pleading. His screams eventually melted into the humming. Then there was more humming by a little girl waiting above us in the darker floors of the abandoned lighthouse. We stood around for a couple of minutes, waiting for something to happen, for Jeremy to come running down the stairs with his pants soaked with piss and tears flowing down his cheeks. We waited until we couldn't have waited any longer. And one by one, we followed the music up those twisted, blood-stained stairs. The triangles expanding. They were trapped in the hotel's parking garage, bracing against a cement wall. The wind had picked up extraordinarily fast. Each droplet of rain felt like a bullet on their bare skin. Hats and glasses tumbled down the beach. Floats followed suit. They had been lost. But the Rhinestone family wasn't lost. Not yet, at least. They were alone, though. Everyone else had already fled. They didn't even wait for the storm to pass. As soon as they reached the parking garage, they had piled into the elevators. I think it's going to pass," screamed David. "See?" Jess couldn't see what he was pointing at. The clouds gathered further down, darkening. Lightning flashed. It made the other hotels and condos look purplish and reddish. Everything beyond it was hidden, non-existent. Jess prayed. Amy cried. It was barely audible over the wind's shrieking fury. Andy crushed her against his chest, like a big brother should. "Honey," Jess yelled. "I don't..." It happened. A break. The wind went still. Everything went still. The rain stopped. Silence. Until David grabbed her hand and took Amy into his arms. He looked back at Andy. "Hold your mother's hand." Then the Rhinestone family ran for it, alone, just like the crew of the Carol A. Deering and Ellen Austin. And those poor lighthouse keepers who were stranded on Great Isaac in 1969. They got a few feet down the parking garage, past a black SUV. They got so close, they started to believe that everything would be okay. And then the wind suddenly picked back up. Only this time, it wasn't just a rough breeze or a part of the storm. It was different, independent, an annihilation from something breathing them in. They didn't even get a chance to scream before. The storm passed fairly quickly. Despite its early proclivity for violence, people started to head back down. They walked out of the elevators, and they all ignored how empty the parking garage was. Captain Fred. Behold, the tale of Captain Fred, a sailor once, but now he's dead. Some say it was the Albatross, but Fred, he's dead, and at what cost? For whence the deckhands met the light, Captain Fred fought through his fight. The lantern in his bitter hand was made into his mastered plan. For where he sang his nightly toast, the blood he spilled became the ghosts he saw and now had seen, each tormented from his misery. The choice they yelled on lighthouse shores, it's death you choose, but hers or yours. But in his head the lantern filled, as Fred would gather no free will. With hold they had on Fred's own room, the harbored horror with wife, old June. They did explain, as you can see, a sentence to eternity. Fred did scream, "Take me, not she! The curse is only unto me!" The ghost did laugh as minutes passed. Fred knew the time had come at last. He had the choice of his or hers, and answered to her forsaken curse. He scaled the rocks for him to flee, and threw himself into the sea. I would like to give a heartfelt thank you to the special friends of the channel for your overwhelming generosity. If you would like to support the channel, the link is below in the description. Also, please send me your stories and poems to duchessofdarkness27@gmail.com. You can also find me on Instagram at duchess.ofdarkness and Twitter at duchessofdarkn2. I want to thank all my listeners for your kindness, your encouragement, and your support. It means the world to me. Thank you for joining me. Until next time.